this is Andre. A new firmware version for the Loupé has been released in December of 2023. It's free to download from GluGlu's website and adds a lot of new features. Of those new additions, the most significant one is the revamped LFO section. Previously, the Loupé's LFO was a pair of waveforms that could apply modulation to the pitch of a loop. In the newest firmware, the LFOs are now 100 different 16-step sequences, which modulate the position of the Loupé's playback head. The loop's pitch is the most obvious thing that gets affected, but the LFOs can also impact other aspects of a loop depending on how they're configured. The new LFO section is extremely deep, and it's one of the single most unique aspects of what has already been a very iconoclastic device. I'm not going to pretend to fully understand the nuances of the Loupé's new LFOs. There's a lot of technical documentation available for them, some of which makes sense to me and some of which is totally over my head, at least for right now. So for the time being, I've taken a more intuitive approach to learning about the LFOs. They have a lot of parameters to play with, and changing just one of them can make a huge difference in how an LFO affects a loop. So what I like to do is look at one or two parameters in depth and experiment with changing just those values while keeping everything else the same. In this particular video, we look at the LFO depth and waveform parameters and explore how even small changes in the values of either of those settings can dramatically transform how an LFO affects the sound. There's one thing I want to mention specifically, which is that some LFO settings will produce pitches that fall outside of 12-tone equal temperament. In simpler terms, that means the LFOs can make notes that are out of tune with normal instruments. In this video, you'll notice that the depth values we use are ones with an asterisk next to them, and those values indicate depth settings that are the most conventionally usable. But even then, depending on the waveform you use, some pitches will not be in tune with common instruments or tuning conventions. This can be hard to hear if you're listening to something by itself with no additional instruments to compare it with, and this video is just solo Loupé playing a single note loop. So I mention this because I don't want people to see this video, get ideas about modulating and arpeggiating their loops along with other instruments, and then realize that some of the pitches aren't in tune with those regular instruments. Now, there are ways to counteract these tuning issues using other reed effects parameters, and we'll be examining those in the future. Personally, I really like microtonality, so I don't see this as being a bad thing, but I also understand why some people can't deal with it, so I mention it specifically for that reason. As always, thank you very much for tuning in.